super excited to get started. So before we actually start with the webinar, I just want to go over a couple of webinar notes for you all. So to your right of the screen, you will have your GoToWebinar chat panel, and that's where you can submit your questions or feedback throughout the webinar. And then also at the end of you will get a link of the recording and the presentation that will be emailed out to you tomorrow. And of course, if you have any questions, you can reach us at contact@powerdms.com. And so we'll go ahead and get started, and I will hand it over to our amazing presenters, and they will take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rebecca. My name is Jessica Tyler. I'm the General Manager of our Professional Standards Suite here at PowerDMS. I'm a retired Deputy Chief out of New Mexico, retired from Farmington PD after 20 years in law enforcement here in the great state of New Mexico. Spent the bulk of my career at Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office, where I spent a lot of time over internal affairs, also our Professional Standards Division, including hiring and recruiting, our training academy, etc. Then went on to Albuquerque Police Department, where I had the opportunity to work on the DOJ reforms. Specifically there, I was the major over the Professional Accountability Bureau, also over training, hiring, the academy, and then ultimately our use of force investigations and internal affairs. So great to be here with you today. Looking forward to Kevin and I talking with you guys about the journey of the employee from hiring to retiring and how our software will support you. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kevin.
Thanks, Jessica. Hello, everyone. My name is Kevin Zadro. I hail from Maryland, but worked in Virginia for a long, long time. I was the former recruitment and training unit sergeant in charge of all things recruiting, right? So the hire to retire, that cradle to grave process for us, background investigations, training, academy staff, lots of experience with Power Policy, as we were a customer there for many years before I transitioned to here. So I am the associate product manager for our new vetted product, which is our background investigations tool. So we'll be talking about that today as well. Super excited to cover several of our products that handle this hire to retire theme, starting with vetted. So glad to be here, and I think we're going to deliver a lot of great content in this webinar.
Yeah, absolutely. And we, of course, encourage you guys, like Rebecca said, if you have questions throughout the presentation, feel free to drop them in the chat. But an overview of what we'll be covering today is the PowerDMS platform. Again, a lot of people still think of PowerDMS as the policy company. That was, of course, our flagship product. That's how I came to know and first use PowerDMS throughout my career, like Kevin, utilizing the products for a large portion of our career, to the point where I actually started to kind of take it for granted that every agency, it's like, you must have software that has, accountability and the ability to reconcile your policies and show, version control, et cetera. But we've grown to be so much more. So that's really what we want to share with you today. And in doing that, we're going to basically take you from the journey of hiring your employees all the way through the end of their careers, and showing you how our software is really going to help you be operational in all of those phases. And then, of course, with all of that, what are the benefits that your agency gets when your software works together? So we definitely want to be able to give our customers more and more from one vendor. And so we really look at it being a partnership with our agencies that we serve, and wanting our software to work together, all of the different components of the software to support you. And then, of course, we'll give some time for Q&A at the end. So again, main focus, or how we're going to start out, is showing you what that PowerDMS platform looks like, showing you a glimpse into all of the products and how they really support each other. So the complete platform, being able to look at it in buckets of those operational features that you're trying to look. So of course, the beginning of the employee's career, starting with that talent acquisition. We'll talk a little bit about insight, that applicant tracking, bringing those employees into your organization. Kevin will talk about vetted, which is one of our newest products. Really excited to talk to you about it. We know it's going to change the way organizations are able to bring their people on, streamlining that process with background investigations. The next bucket is, of course, training and development. We want to make sure that we can support our employees from the time that they're hired. So whether it's, that training that's done during the police academy, that on-the-job training during their FTO phases, being able to support that policy training through Recall, which is another great new product that really helps reinforce the policy understanding and competencies. And then, of course, again, our flagship products land in this middle bucket of compliance and policies. So, of course, our flagship product of Power Policy as well as Standard. That's, again, where people know us best for policy and accreditation management, but also our new software for PSS, which, of course, is near and dear to my heart. We have a Power IA for that IA case management, complaint management, et cetera. Power Action, which is all of those administrative actions that our employees take during the course of their duties. And then Power Vitals, which is our early intervention software. And then the next bucket of services is under engagement and wellness. So being able to have that community outreach in a meaningful way, that's a really robust mechanism to be able to do things like citizen surveys, pre-arrival instructions with Power Engage. And then we have Power Line, which is our responder wellness app, which again pairs really nicely to support our officers during the course of their careers, from again the beginning of their careers throughout, and then of course workforce management with time. And so looking at these different buckets, if you will, or categories of how we support you, really gives you the vision of the complete platform of what we now offer with PowerDMS. So really excited to talk to you more about each of these today. And, you know, we hear this from our customers all the time, and this might seem like a small thing, but having that one platform and one login is really important. So as you can see here, if you log into Power Policy, your normal landing page that people are used to, then you can access all of your different modules from one place. And so again, we ask so much more of our employees these days. So for them to have just one login that they can access different mechanisms that are going to support them during the course of their day-to-day operations is a time saving, it simplifies things, and I think it makes it easier on our employees. So I think Kevin and I both feel pretty strongly about that, that although this seems like a very simple thing, it's actually a really big feature that we can give people. You don't have to have different logins, different passwords to access this. You're not having to change applications during the course of your day. You can access all of these things from that one login. So again, extremely important and definitely an enhancement that can be provided to your agencies and your employees.
Yeah, and it's really just the beginning of that shared experience, right? Where we're going to start to see
Absolutely.
later on how the products talk to one another and where we can leverage, you know, cross-platform or cross functionality between those different products. So this is big. Hopefully you guys are, you know, cheering and applauding.
Exactly. And so again, we want you guys to think about this today in the concept of, you know, supporting your employees from hiring to retiring. And the very first component, of course, of bringing employees into our organization is hiring. And a big task in that hiring process is, of course, doing that background investigation. So Kevin, love to hear you walk us through this great new piece of software that we have.
Yeah, sure. So the journey really starts with the selection process. And although we're not here to talk you know, specifically about Insight, I would be remiss if I didn't at least touch on it in this discussion. So for applicant background investigations, we know that many agencies rely on extensive paper-based processes that are generally ran through disparate systems and just kind of clunky, and then they pass these physical paper packets through the hiring chain of command. And so Vetted allows agencies to easily manage, track, and reduce the time it takes in order to complete a background investigation and then send it through an electronic workflow. It really starts by digitizing the personal history statement and the collection of supporting documents from applicants. I believe that we ease the burden for the applicant in two major ways. The first is in their experience. Vetted is desktop, mobile, and tablet ready, not just friendly, right? We often hear about mobile friendly or tablet friendly, but it's not a scaled down version of what you see on the desktop, but it's been optimized and restructured to increase the user's experience on the phone or on the tablet. And they can, in fact, complete and submit their entire personal history statement and all of their supporting documents this way, right? Through the mobile device or through the tablet. So secondly, with the integration to Insight, which is our applicant tracking system, agencies that use governmentjobs.com or have a careers page have the added benefit for their applicants that we can take pre-existing data that exists in the application and then populate it into the personal history statement. So we know that this will decrease applicant frustration in that they're not having to enter the same information twice. and increase your conversion of, those that we've applied or that we've invited to complete the personal history statement and actually submitted it back to us to run with. And just to touch on a few things, while all the content of the instructions, the waivers, the correspondence letters, the questionnaires, all that stuff is templated in the system, but we've built in the autonomy and the configurability so that each agency can customize, these things or these fields or these forms to their needs. Through applicant and investigator checklists, which you see here kind of in this GIF that's rolling through, we're helping to build consistency in your process, ensuring legal defensibility. Automation across identifying and tracking potential disqualifiers, connecting with references, and even building the final report means faster, more accurate investigations, with vetted being the single source of truth for all of your applicant files. And then we'll cap all of that off with reporting analytics that will kind of blow your mind. And we're going to talk about reporting and analytics essentially through all of these products, because we know how valuable that is for your administrators, for your executive team, and those that are making decisions. So.
Yeah, and I think, Kevin, I just want to add to that, or I think you and I can both talk from experience that traditionally we did a really poor job of using analytics and things like hiring, even training our FTO programs, like you said. We'll be talking about that a lot today. But that's something that we're really committed to here at PowerDMS, is bringing those analytics to the forefront so that we can empower our decision makers to have the data at their fingertips that should be guiding their decision making, and also just, process improvement, et cetera, within an organization. So I know one thing, that we struggled with a lot at Albuquerque Police Department while I was there was, we were down hundreds of officers, needing to get candidates through the hiring process in a more efficient manner, but also making sure that you have, blind hiring processes, that you're tracking the information. And so having software that really supports you through that can really make your hiring processes so much more efficient and effective in your agency.
Yeah, and just to kind of throw out a few, we talk about things like disqualifications over a time spread against certain EEO data, how many invitations are sent versus PHS is being sent back into the system, how long it takes on average for an applicant to complete and submit their personal history statement, the investigator caseload. Like, this is all stuff that, exactly like you said, where once we're armed with this information, then it's easier to understand, where are we losing people in our process? Like, through that, what are we losing, right? Are we losing educated people, those with second and third languages, right? Prior experience. Like, it's really different when you get to see these visuals, right? And all the different charts and bar graphs and grid data that we just kind of stack in front of you to say, like, hey, this is what you're going through, right? Let us help you better understand it so that you can make those changes or those necessary updates to your process to increase, the number of total applicants or qualified applicants that you're looking at.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the other features, Kevin, that I don't know if you want to touch on, and you may have touched on it momentarily, but what I also love about this software is it was made in mind to both make, like you said, the process easier for both the applicant as well as the employer, right? And so it's great that we can have both. And I think where that's really beneficial to us is in our communities when we're trying to hire people. Again, you want those qualified applicants for each of our positions. But if you have multiple positions that maybe could be applicable to a citizen, especially in our civilian positions, whether you have a public service aide or an evidence tech, and somebody wants to maybe apply to multiple positions, they can do that here in this software, right? And share their information. And we can look at it again to be able to say, you know what, maybe this person's skill set is actually better suited for this position, and allow us to make decisions to fill our positions and our openings in our department in a more meaningful way, which I think is a great feature of this software.
Yeah, you nailed it.
Awesome.
All right, let's jump into PowerReady.
Yeah, so once we get those employees hired, how can we support them during their field training officer process and other roles? Yeah,
exactly. And so first and foremost with PowerReady, it's not just for field training, right? Most agencies don't have or have never considered following a regimented process with the same level of mentorship or oversight that we see in field training but doing that for like new unit training or new supervisors, right? PowerReady really supports over a dozen different program types used by law enforcement, ECCs, and corrections. And so these preloaded templates make tracking and managing your in-field or on-the-job training really pretty easy, right? So you could choose the program that you're currently doing and get started, or you can kind of build out what you need. Now, it's been a minute since I was in field training, but I talked about this in some other webinars and often wonder how much more time or how many more things I could have been exposed to in that 12 weeks of field training had we not spent so much time combing through information, transposing data from one place or another into the DOR, and so on. And so with PowerReady, you really can build consistency and efficiency in your process, which gives that valuable time back to your trainers and your trainees to either like hit the road and go do it for real, or carve out some time to do some role play, talk through some stuff, and you know, beyond just like the kind of the mind numbing you know, documentation piece of this that we see. As you've already heard with Global Platforms approach, things like adding CAD data or linking a policy to our DOR is possible. So the process of tracking phase completion or underperforming recruits is smooth and can be analyzed quickly within these dashboards. Like we talked about reporting with Vetted, it's easily one of my favorite things about PowerReady. As a former training sergeant, it was an absolute insurmountable task to review every DOR and pull any sort of collective information out on how a trainee is really doing over a period of time, or maybe even more importantly, how an FTO is doing over multiple trainees. Right. So some of the best reports include the trainee performance trends report and the trainer performance reports. This is going to obviously help with the integrity of your program, which is an absolute must. In addition to the reporting, PowerReady gives your trainees an opportunity to evaluate their trainers. And so while reading the feedback is great, identifying those trends over time is really how you determine the success of a particular trainer. It's been shown, right, that when new employees experience a smooth but broad training process, not only do they turn out to be better employees, but they stay longer. And I think all of our agencies can benefit, right? All of our communities can benefit from not only having better trained, you know, officers, dispatchers, whoever's earlier, but keeping them around for longer, having that consistency and that that institutional knowledge and sort of that legacy is a big deal for our communities as well. And so you'll see the last thing here, or really it's the middle bullet point, but it's the last thing I'm going to talk about before I get Jessica to kind of weigh in, is increasing the transparency and getting that information back to your employees faster so that they really know where they stand in the process, right? What am I doing well in? What am I not? Where are the opportunities? This program makes it very easy for that information to flow all directions and to keep even the employee kind of up to date on how they're performing. Anything to add, Jessica?
No, I just want to say, you know, I really love that aspect of this piece of software, because so oftentimes, like you said, we lose employees early because of the stress level that they have during their initial training programs. And of course, you know, you and I come from probably older school where that was part of the program, right? Was you wanted your trainees to be under stress, and we're growing and maturing from that. And so why not have, you know, software that really supports, like you said, that transparency, as well as helping, you know, anybody who's over a field training program within their organization be able to have those better analytics on the trainers as well. Can we identify, is it a personality conflict, or is this trainer, you know, maybe having a hard time as well? Maybe their tasks, as well as being able just to kind of look overall on, you know, how many trainings have they had over a year? Maybe they need a break and maybe we're burning this trainer out. So having, again, access to that information really helps empower us as administrators within our organizations to ensure that we're properly staffing our FTO programs. And then the last thing I just want to say is, you know, again, another thing I took for granted in my first agency is we did have a good field training program for our supervisors. And so, you know, it's one of those things that seems foreign when you go and people are still like, oh my gosh, you had a guidebook and you had to do DORs for your training program as a new sergeant. It's like, yes, we did. And why are not more organizations doing that? And this allows you, like you said, to have those kind of pre-built programs to help really elevate the professionalism of your agency, which I think is a great thing for the profession overall.
Yeah, the last thing I'll throw out is if you've ever been a training unit sergeant or like an FTO program coordinator and received, you know, a FOIA request or a subpoena to gather and supply documentation related to one person, like it's it's impossible, right? When you've got just binders and paper and stuff everywhere, it really is an impossible task to pull that together. Not to mention, you're missing all of the great analytics that come behind, the scoring metrics, the trends that are created, the comments that are added, and things like that. So.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there too as well. I mean, the time savings that you have in providing documentation in all aspects of the program with a software, I feel like, it pays for itself right there to be able to save that time.
Yeah, 100%. All right, so that takes us into PowerTime, which is our shift scheduling software. One of the biggest frustrations of public safety staffing is that many systems were not designed with 24-hour coverage in mind. PowerDMS, or PowerTime rather, was purpose-built to centralize, simplify, and streamline the process for your team. It makes it easy for your employees to see their schedules well in advance, and from their mobile phones, they can pick up open shifts and easily stay informed. This makes it easy for everybody to stay up to date when there are shift swaps, call outs, open shifts, and more. Having a product this powerful can reduce scheduling errors. It can award overtime based on seniority, first come, first serve, or even off of a rotating list. So this obviously helps to promote fairness, increase morale, and really ease the burden on your admin staff, right? Which is just a bear of a task to deal with, scheduling and payroll and all the changes that take place, again, over this sort of 24/7, 365 approach. PowerTime can even help automate and collect shift bid preferences when the time comes for your agency. And really the reporting options, because we keep kind of touching on that, we keep coming back to that. They're almost endless in PowerTime. Call off history for employees, court appearances, open shifts, overtime, time off requests, and more. There's really a lot of great information. And this product will certainly help to ease that staffing burden that so many agencies are dealing with, whether it's in Excel or on paper sheets or some other system that they're just kind of making work, even though it really wasn't built for this idea of 24-hour coverage, or maybe it's 12-hour shifts or Panama rotations. You won't have any of those issues in PowerTime. So
yeah, I think it's another great tool to help support our supervisors as well as our employees, reduce that stress, help maintain professionalism, while also making things like taking into consideration rules or requirements from collective bargaining agreements, and kind of relieving the supervisors of stress to making sure that all of those requirements are being followed. And like you said, making sure that things are done fairly and in accordance with those rules or regulations that guide your staffing requirements within your agency.
Yeah, I think it's one of these things where you don't know what you don't know. So until you have a product like this that can do all of those things, that can work based off logic or based off policies or rules, then it's like, oh wow, right? This is amazing. We should have been doing this all along.
Yeah, again, just saving time, right, for our employees.
Yep. All right, on to Power Recall. So next in the lineup is Power Recall, which helps us to address one of the most pressing issues in policy training, and that's low comprehension of organizational expectations. The way this works is it leverages AI to create personalized training cards from existing policies, improving comprehension and ultimately retention, right? We want people to be able to recall, hint, hint, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, that information as quickly as possible. So integrated with Power Policy, it organizes content into decks and cards, and then it customizes a learning path forward for each of your employees or each of those roles. It works through spaced repetition and real-time analytics, basically optimizes training effectiveness, ensuring that employees receive relevant role-specific education while tracking the learning process. And so if you're not familiar with spaced repetition, that just really involves reintroducing information at strategic points, just as the learner is about to forget the information. So this method strengthens memory retention, making it invaluable for long-term learning. Really, if I were to sit down with your team, it's a good way to think about it. If I were to sit down with your team now and present to them a policy or some other block of material, and then give them a test, most would probably do well or well enough, right? But what happens when we wait to ask those questions or to administer that test 3 weeks or even 3 months from now? What can they recall? What do they know, especially in sort of the heat of the moment or in a pinch, when there's a lot of other factors and stressful things happening all at the same time? So recall can really help to close those knowledge gaps, reduce liability, and enhance your responder safety. We certainly want our public safety to be better, right? To understand what they can do, when they can do it, and ultimately for that to be rooted in your policies. Responding to a critical incident or something with high liability but low frequency in your jurisdiction is really not the time for your responders to be questioning themselves or trying to look up the answer, right? Like, I mean, we're all really good at driving fast with coffee, typing on the MDT, running lights and sirens, and not spilling our coffee. But I also don't need to be trying to get into PowerDMS to find a policy to see, what I can do. So how does it work, right? So we first auto-generate these digital flashcards from your policies or your documents stored in PowerDMS. And then it then shows those to the employees and then creates this personalized learning path going forward. The way the algorithm works is it really assesses the employee's strengths and weaknesses, ensuring that material requiring more attention is reviewed more frequently, while information that they've already mastered is spaced out over longer periods of time. It's of course accessible on their desktop or on their PowerDMS mobile app, so they can quickly stay on top of their cards and complete those tasks. There is some gamification behind it. It can be fun. We've had so many early adopter customers and so many beta agencies that have said, like, people love this. They love the way that they learn through this because it doesn't feel like learning, right? And that's, I think, really, really big. I'll also kind of add, that this isn't just for critical policies. So think about like your specialized unit SOPs, a promotional exam prep, legislative updates, really anything that you could dump into PowerDMS that you're already using that as a repository for. We can leverage recall to then build questions off of that material. And again, show it through the spaced repetition to your employees. Tons of great analytics in here too, right? Helping you to identify gaps in your policies, probably more importantly, gaps in your training, right? So that you can more effectively like spend time training on the things that you need. If you think about having maybe 2 squads of people, we've asked them all these questions and one squad does really well every time they're asked about pursuits and the other squad, doesn't. Well, squad A doesn't need to spend any time in roll call on pursuit training because they get it. Every time they're asked a question and recall about, some pursuit action or something from the policy, they nail it. They could spend their time on, interacting with juveniles or AEDCPR, BLS refresher or something else where, that squad B might really need to spend that extra 10 or 15 minutes in roll call hammering through that pursuit policy to really better understand, what they can do and when they can do it. I'll kind of end with this. The product becomes exceptionally valuable when you identify policies that are being violated, resulting in some level of administrative review or internal affairs investigation. And then you can issue specific decks and cards to address those gaps, which is really kind of a great lead into professional standards. And so, Jessica, if you have anything you want to add about recall, certainly do that, but then we'll get into the IA action and vitals.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're absolutely right. I mean, it's a great segue into the professional standard solutions. But the one thing I will say, or a couple things I want to say about recall is, like you pointed out, one is it makes learning fun. And it goes back to our childhood, right? Like the using flashcards to memorize our multiplication tables, or having the ability to have that repetition in our learning process is really beneficial. And it's something that, I feel like in adult learning, particularly, we got away from that for a couple decades. And I see that now, even, I have a son in college and his classes, there's whole apps out there that will do that for their college courses as well. It's like, no, generate me these flashcards so that I can learn this information. And particularly, like you said, not just for those high risk areas, but even for things like knowing statutory language for your charging documents, all of that legal language that sometimes is really difficult for people to, one, consume, as well as just really understand and then be able to apply it. This can be a huge, game changer or addition to how you conduct training within your organization. And ultimately, like you said, fun. And I think that people love the fact that it also gives them immediate feedback to how they did on the cards, which we all know we live in a society where it's like, I want that feedback right now. And so them having that feedback on how they did on their cards, I think is also a way to really keep them engaged in that learning process.
Yeah, and actually, now that you mention that, I think it's important to touch on the fact that we're not just giving them immediate feedback in how they did, but in the cases where maybe they've missed the mark a little bit, we can drive them right back to the policy, the exact section, where that card is coming from. And so they're not having to, root through it. They're not having to open, a separate system and kind of do it that way. It's like, hey, asked and answered, here's the result. And if you need to know more, like, here's where it comes from. And we can drive them right back to that policy very easily through the Power Recall stuff. So yeah, good point.
Absolutely. Yeah, so again, into our software. And so one of the areas that we all know that, is under more and more scrutiny, I feel like every year, is all of those administrative actions that we take during the course of our normal day-to-day operations. And so the amount of reporting that is necessary for our employees to take, and then also for our supervisors to review, has increased instrumentally over the course of the last decade. And for good reason, right? We want to increase that professionalism, maintain transparency and trust with our communities, ensure that we're adhering to our policies, et cetera. But it's been kind of burdensome on organizations. And so about 2 years ago, we set out to create our professional standards software to be able to streamline and, again, really lean on our flagship products such as policy to be able to guide best practices in these administrative reviews. So Power Action is our force and reporting software for all of those administrative actions. So not just use of force, but everything from a vehicle accident, vehicle pursuits, occupational injuries, et cetera. It has that library of 15 report templates that can be, again, like Kevin talked about earlier, configured to your organization's needs, because we know that, whether you're in New Mexico or Virginia or California, yes, what we do is mostly the same, but the terminology or the vernacular that we use, maybe the process is a little bit different. So making sure that you're able to make the software work for your needs is extremely important. And so while we want to be able to streamline that reporting, we also want to give agencies the latitude to be able to configure their reports and their workflows to their needs, while also making it user-friendly for everywhere, again, from the officer up through the chief of police. And so, again, making sure that they can access this from any of their mobile devices, whether it be a laptop or their mobile phone, they can do that. They can easily access the reports that they need at their fingertips. We have the ability to have that CAD integration, pulling in information from the CAD call itself to help streamline the process as well as save time, ensure accuracy. So not only reducing the propensity for data entry errors, but also just streamlining the process and saving time for our employees where, before they maybe only had to do one report, now they have to do that administrative report as well. So making sure that they can do that. Also the ability to copy one information from one of these administrative reports to another. So I know so oftentimes when we have a major call, let's say you had a foot pursuit, a use of force, a hands-on use of force, and a tasing incident, we lump all that together and do one administrative review. But to be able to break that down and actually review each of those sections of that incident independently really makes us stronger within our agencies. And so being able, rather than having to have them do 3 reports from scratch, they can copy over all of the sections of the report besides the interaction stage and be able to have that consistency amongst the reports, but allow us to review each of those portions of that incident independently, which I think is extremely important, as well as gives us cleaner analytics. And I'm sure you guys are starting to hear, okay, you hear the theme here, data analytics, we want to make sure that you have the correct information. And beyond that, also, like I said, we want to make sure that this is accessible and meaningful and user-friendly for everybody, no matter what role you're in within your organization. And so having supervisors being able to access this at their fingertips, getting that notification on their phone or via email that one of their officers or deputies has submitted a report which needs their review and approval, making sure that they're informed, having that one place to go to, again, to be able to access that information, again, lessens that anxiety within our employees within the organization, because it's going to cut down on the timeframes that it takes to review those processes, lets people know where they stand or where their report is within the review process. And so it reduces that stress during the review. And then again, ultimately, making sure that we have the ability to have analytics. So each of the action reports that we talked about, again, there's 15 in our template library. Each of those action reports has its own analytics dashboard, giving people easy access to look at that data for that specific report type. Again, so whether it's, an officer injury, a vehicle pursuit, your K9 deployments, etc. Each of those will have its own dashboard, allowing you to share and broadcast that information with various stakeholders or having access to it within your own organization. For our accreditation managers on the call, how nice would it be for them to be able just to subscribe to actually that report, and it's in your inbox quarterly or annually, and having that done for you and having trust in your data. One thing that we hear oftentimes from people is that when you're getting information from disparate systems, the terminology and the data points don't always line up exactly how you need them to be. So having confidence in that data is extremely important and valuable to your agency for sure. And let's say then we do have an action that is found to be out of policy or needs further investigation. We can actually take that action report and pull it directly into PowerIA. So yeah, go ahead and click that next slide. So PowerIA is going to be our internal affairs case management software, which is going to be a full case management system for your full internal affairs investigation, as well as complaints. And so having that automatic and very strong integration allows your investigators to save a lot of time by pulling in that action report that may be found to be out of policy or again needs further investigation directly into their case, which is a huge time saving, again, reduces time and really keeps things just nicely tidied up, making sure that you are able to dot your I's and cross your T's with your IA investigations. So again, you can configure your case types to have time durations. So if you, most every state now has timeframes on how long you have to complete your IA investigation. You can set those timeframes on here, as you could also with action reporting within each of your workflow steps, making sure that your investigations are done timely, as well as the fact that you're adhering to any requirements that you may have under your Peace Officer Bill of Rights, collective bargaining agreement, or other policy statements that govern your IA investigations. And being able to also then pull in any of your complaints, you have the ability to have a citizen complaint portal that can be posted publicly on your website, showing again that accessibility and transparency with your community. The public complaint is available in 12 different languages, which I think is a great selling point to be able to show again that accessibility to your communities. In addition to that, you also have, of course, your internal complaints, but then you're able to differentiate and again, report out on the number of complaints you have internally, externally, or that are stemming from other types of policy violations. Again, leaning on our flagship product of Power Policy, you have that tight integration here where your investigators can actually search your policies directly in their case. So while I'm investigating a case, if I have an allegation of untruthfulness, I can go to the Power Policy integration within my PowerIA case, actually type up the words truthfulness. It'll search all of our policies within Power Policy, and it allows me to highlight the exact section of the policy that's applicable to that specific allegation. And again, this then in turn leads again to great data, being able to report out on what portions of your policy and what policies are most often violated, again, informing you on potential changes that you need to make to either training or policies within your organization. And so having this information available at your fingertips, again, I think is extremely exciting as well as empowering. So for any of our command staff and chiefs on the phone, to be able to log into PowerDMS, have access to your dashboard analytics, and being able to tell whether it's a community stakeholder or your mayor, a city councilor, a county commissioner, any one of your staff within your organization, exactly how many complaints you have within that year up to that point in time, how many uses of force you have, how many of those are in policy, out of policy, how many internal and external complaints do I have? we are expected to have this information, but oftentimes when our police leaders are asked about this information, it's like, let me make a phone call, let me send an email off, and then somebody's going back, hand tabulating their complaints, double checking things, because the last thing we want to do is give a bad answer, right? So it's like, bad data is worse than no data. So having, again, confidence in that data and having accessibility to that information within your PowerDMS platform is very liberating, I think, for our employees. And again, also adds just to that transparency as well as professionalism.
Yeah, I think the coolest thing about Action and IA is like the process of documenting either of those things, like all the way through from start to finish, doesn't have to feel cumbersome. And this product really does a great job at sort of making it easy, right? Making it easy to be consistent and have all that information right there in front of you.
Absolutely. And being able to configure workflows. So one thing I didn't talk about a lot in Action, and it's also true for IA, is you have the ability to configure your workflows for your reviews that work for your agency, and also include those stakeholders that are necessary. So if I want to set my workflow for my vehicle pursuits to include my EVOC instructor, I can easily do that. I can also include maybe my use of force instructor on our use of force reviews, or that academy instructor, so that you have people that are informed within your organization rather than having to wait to have that quarterly or annual review. And it allows you to identify trends earlier. So let's say you have seen an uptick in the number of ECD deployments, and then you go back and you realize it's all from one graduating class. Well, I'm able to then identify that trend much sooner by having either them involved in the workflow, having access to this data, and then we can actually make a meaningful change to address that potential training failure in a much more expedient way than if I had to wait for that annual use of force report review. Like you said, pretty exciting to have it streamlined and just user-friendly for everybody within the organization. And then finally, to be able to take all of that information and bring it into Power Vitals, which is our Wellness Forward early intervention software. So I know many organizations do an early warning or early intervention exercise. Oftentimes it's because of either state statute requirements or accreditation requirements, or potentially you're just doing it because you think it is the right thing to do, which is great. But a lot of times in my experience, I've seen that people go through that as just a way to check the box, and they're not really getting a lot of value out of that. And so we wanted to support people with being able to do your traditional early warning elements, such as getting those alerts, but also make it more meaningful by making it wellness forward and taking into consideration things like officer stress levels, their exposure to trauma. And so again, using the data that's available to us in a more meaningful way. So if I'm looking on, a traditional early warning system or early intervention system, and I'm only looking at complaints and use of force, am I only seeing a sliver of that officer's activity, or potentially what risks he might be for either leaving the career, having an adverse or high risk event? Absolutely, right? Because we know there's so much more to that. So we want to be able to leverage being able to bring in those multiple data sources from lots of different places, giving you full control over what data sources you want to use. You can use up to over 70 different data points for things like, time off, how much court, how much overtime are they working, what CAD calls have they been to, and have they been to, a lot of death scenes lately? Is that maybe something that as a supervisor or an organization I want to keep an eye on an employee? Absolutely, because we know their stress level is going to be likely up. And again, we old school, right? It's like the trauma we're exposed to. It's like, oh, it's just part of the job. It's just part of the job. Well, maybe it is just part of the job, but we have to also acknowledge the fact that that does change our mindset and our ability to handle stress. And we also know that that then is likely going to change how we operate and perform in our day-to-day functions. So being able to support officers earlier than those traditional systems is extremely important. And so you'll see here called out is that pulse score history. So we started something called that pulse score, which is basically looking at how are your employees doing compared to X amount of time ago and to their peers. So if I see an increase in a pulse score, that's indicative of an increased level of stress or exposure to trauma, allowing me to then have a conversation with that an employee prior to the traditional early warning or early indication alert of the 2 uses of force and a complaint. So if I can see earlier, then I'm actually able to have that conversation with my employee to see if they can benefit from additional resources or support, which ultimately will lead to, we think, better outcomes as well as more longevity within their career. And so again, really excited to be able to make early intervention concepts much more meaningful and useful to organizations and really support our employees by having that. Also, I think a great part of this software is that we're able to provide, you can provide check-in templates and assist plans to be able to equip our supervisors to have more confidence when they're dealing with these conversations. You know, I always tell people we're great at dealing with adversity and conflict when we're dealing with somebody in the public, but oftentimes we have a hard time having those more difficult conversations with our own employees. So I think a lot of supervisors have a hard time of knowing where to start. So let's say I get an alert or a pulse alert on Kevin saying that his pulse score has increased, or maybe he's triggered that multi-indicator alert, and I need to have a check-in and with him. I think a lot of supervisors aren't real confident in knowing where to start with that conversation. And so by having those check-in templates, we're setting our supervisors up for success, increasing their confidence, also providing consistency with how we respond to our officers, which I think makes systems like early intervention much more palatable to our employees. And again, if they know that we're coming at it from a way that we are actually here to support them, that's much more meaningful, and we're going to see better outcomes overall.
Yeah, and it's not just like what happened last night or on that last call, right? It's like all this data sort of crashing or converging together to say like, hey, I think you probably need to know about this. You probably need to be aware of this. And so I think in that sense, it's once the employees understand that, you know, this is spread across a lot of time, a lot of people, and a lot of data, then like you said, as far as being easily or more easily palatable, that helps in that regard too.
Again, and yeah, absolutely, Kevin. And I think we recognize that a big source of information that we have that can be a good indicator to us on the health of our employees is the type of calls that they're being dispatched to and that they're taking. And so having that integration with CAD, and we're using an AI engine to scrub basically those CAD notes to be able to help us identify potentially traumatic calls and then score that, takes the human factor out of people like me saying, no, that's just part of the job, and actually taking into account, no, yes, it is part of the job, but it is also a traumatic event, and being able to quantify that stress and trauma. And again, just bringing it to the supervisor's attention and bringing that visibility basically of what our officers go through makes us a stronger organization, and again, is going to help empower our supervisors to know their people better, which at the end of the day, I think we all want that, and employees will value that. And so as a supervisor, if I can know that that you've been to some bad calls, you can take in personal life events if you choose to, such as, you know, things like divorce, hard financial times, maybe a sickness within your family, other things that we know are going to produce a lot of stress or potential trauma for our employees. We can also ingest those types of data points into Power Vitals. And of course, we would have the analytics on this as well. Also, I think one story I always like to share, and then we'll save time for questions and answers, but earlier this year, the department that I had spent the bulk of my employment with, Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office here in New Mexico, had an incident where they ended up had to arrest one of their own detectives. And it came in as a call for service at a local convenience store where he was in plain clothes, wasn't identified as a police officer or sheriff's deputy, pulled a gun on a family after an altercation. And it turns out once they get there, they realize he's a deputy, and he's intoxicated, and he's in his unmarked patrol truck as a detective unit and had 14 empty bottles of vodka in his police vehicle. And we all know that there was lots of indications, I'm sure, of having an alcohol issue at work, and why had nobody brought that forward? And oftentimes it's because our employees don't know where or how to bring those things forward. So the other thing Power Vitals does is it allows an email for peer comments or concerns to be emailed to the Power Vitals admin to be able to have a mechanism to bring those types of issues forward. And so again, I really feel strongly that we will be hearing stories of how this software has saved employees' careers by empowering people to bring concerns forward, identifying that trauma and stress early, and allowing us to get resources to our employees to support them. And so, you know, I think it's exciting to be able to have software that's really meaningful and is looking out for the well-being of our employees.
Yes, perfect.
So, oh, and I lied. We're not going to go right to question and answer, but we're going to wrap this up with kind of talking about when all of this software works together. And I think Kevin and I have both kind of talked about that a little bit here throughout the presentation. But really, we want to be able to call out here the PowerDMS platform, having that core information, of course, having that product access available to our employees in one spot with that single sign-on, that one place to be able to log in and access all of your systems, being able to receive and broadcast data, having that consolidated reporting and good analytics, and then bringing that all down and into the different information. Also be mindful of having those external systems feeding that PowerDMS platform. And so again, we first come down into that first layer of having, you know, things like our flagship products of policy standards being supported by recall, and then having those systems and software feed into mechanisms like Power Ready for our training and role readiness within our organizations, having policy feed into IA, ensuring that our investigations are done within our policies, as well as having access to our policies there within app for our investigators, making sure that our systems like Insight being able to capture our applicants and then vetting them through, you know, background investigations, ensuring that that's done timely and efficiently, making it user-friendly for the applicants as well as the background investigators is extremely important, and then feeding them into their FTO programs or other job readiness. And then with all of that, feeding it back in. So I always tell people, you know, stronger together. So the more touch points we have within our different software systems, the more informed we're going to be and the better supported our employees are going to be by the different mechanisms within that. And then ultimately, we can also ingest information with our CAD information that's going to help us feed into these systems and being more efficient, again, making sure that we're using data from all of our systems in an efficient and meaningful way. Of course, then too, we did talk a little bit about engage, making sure the other component of that, you know, is making sure that we're engaging our community, having the ability to get feedback as well as provide feedback to our community stakeholders is extremely important, and then pull that information back in through surveys to reinforce the good job that our employees are doing. And then also with Line, we didn't talk about this directly within Vitals, but Line is our wellness app that gives resources that are available to our employees, again, on their mobile devices in an anonymous way, to be able to have access to things like, let me watch a video on, you know, decompressing after a call, or let me access some articles on stress management or anger management, etc. Let me talk to a peer, message a peer about maybe they've gone through, you know, responding to a child death call recently and having the ability to talk with somebody about that. So again, really making sure that we're supporting our employees all the way from the time that they first come and have contact with our organizations, and making sure that we support them throughout their career.
All right, I think, yeah, go ahead, Alicia.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Alicia Conrad, and I'm going to help field some of the questions that we've been getting. But first, we wanted to have a poll for you all. If there's anything, if there's a product that you want to see more of specifically, go ahead and mark that here. And we will follow up with you so you can meet with one of our experts on the product talk with a representative from our team, and we can show you a little more in depth into each of the specific products. So we'll give you a little bit for that. While you're completing that, I just wanted to remind everyone that we are going to be sending out the recording from this webinar, and you will also be getting the slides from today. So you'll have all of that to reference later, and we are also going to send you a link to a page that has some high-level videos on each of these products. Each video is only about 5 minutes, so you can get kind of a taste of the product and show people in your department if you want to let them see what it might look like to use some of these for your agency. And we'll just give that a second. Okay, perfect. So we're ready for Q&A. We have a ton of questions. Love the engagement, love everyone asking all these questions. We won't be able to get to all of them, but I promise that I will follow up with you with the answers to your questions directly if we don't get to yours. So let me find one of the common ones here real quick. We have a lot of questions about PSS specifically, Jessica, the Professional Standards Suite. One of them is about data migration. Can you talk a little bit about importing legacy cases with IA and our plans for action next year?
Yeah, absolutely. We know that having access to that legacy information is extremely important. So currently you have the ability to import 26 different fields from that legacy case information that you have, as well as full PDFs of those cases into Power IA so that you have access to them in Power IA once you go live with it, as well as giving you access to that analytics. We have the plans for early 2025 to be able to do the same with things like your use of forest pursuit data as well. So yeah, we definitely recognize that having that legacy case information is important, and we do have mechanisms to be able to support that.
Perfect. We had a couple of questions come in about single sign-on and multi-factor authentication. Can you all talk a little bit about how we can support that across some of the products?
You want me to take this one,
Yeah,
Jessica?
okay.
Okay, all right, very
Sure.
good. Yeah, so our secure sign-in allows the use of a unified login, right? So one email address, one password in order to provision into the product and then have access to whatever the products that are available to that person. We can still work through Active Directory, Azure, Okta, if they're looking for that sort of SSO experience, which is different than what we're calling secure sign-in or our SSI. But absolutely, we can tap those and make it all work together. And then there was a question about multi-factor authentication as well. That is handled through our global platform, so we can absolutely handle MFA.
Yeah, and I think it is worth calling out in order for CJIS compliancy, some of our products that we've talked about today, that is required. So we would definitely work with you to move you over to that secure sign-on with that MFA, as well as, again, one of the things that's most important for this whole platform experience is having that single sign-on experience. So.
Yeah, and that's where we would handle session timeout and stuff like that as well, which is also all like CJIS compliance requirements.
Correct.
Right. And then we had a question about data as well. Is there a way to export data that has been collected? And if they were to move away from the platform for any reason, who would have access to the data?
Yeah, so ultimately each of these products kind of handle that their own way, right? There's not like one way of handling across all the products, but ultimately the data is yours, right? We're a SaaS provider, so you own the data and we're obligated to give it back to you. That looks a little bit different across product, and it also looks a little bit different with where you might be going, right? Like where you want to take that information to, or how you want to be able to access it afterwards. So I think, following the webinar, if there's more conversation that needs to be had there, or there's very specific questions, then we can take those, but just know that we can account for that.
And specifically, like for the PSS products, and I think for Vetted and Ready as well, you do have the ability to export that data via the reporting and analytics tools while you are utilizing the product. So, for example, if you wanted additional information beyond what was available in the dashboard and those particular filters, you can export all of that data into basically an Excel spreadsheet and do additional reporting and access your data in that manner.
Perfect. We are at time. I've made note of the other questions that we didn't quite get to, and I'm going to be reaching out to you with the answers to those questions. Thank you so much, Jessica and Kevin, for presenting this to us, and thank you everyone for attending. We really appreciate your time, and have a great day.
Thanks.